Hear the word of the Lord from John 21, 7 through 22. Then the disciple Jesus loved said to Peter, "It's the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his tunic, for he had stripped for work, jumped into the water, and headed to shore. The others stayed with the boat and pulled the loaded net to shore, for they were only about 100 yards from shore. When they got there, they found breakfast waiting for them, fish cooking over a charcoal fire and some bread. "Bring some of the fish you've just caught," Jesus said. So Simon Peter went aboard and dragged the net to shore. There were 153 large fish, and yet the net hadn't torn. Now come and have some breakfast," Jesus said. None of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Then Jesus served them bread and the fish. This was the third time Jesus had appeared to the disciples since he had been raised from the dead. After breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," Peter replied. "You know I love you." "Then feed my lambs," Jesus told him. Jesus repeated the question, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" "Yes, Lord," Peter said. "You know I love you." "Then take care of my sheep," Jesus said. The third time he asked him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt that Jesus asked the question a third time. He said, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Then feed my sheep. I tell you the truth. When you were young, you were able to do as you liked. You dressed yourself, you went wherever you wanted to go. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hand, and others will dress you. They will take you where you don't want to go." Jesus said this to let him know by what kind of death he would glorify God. Then Jesus told him, "Follow me." Peter turned around and saw behind them the disciple Jesus loved, the one who had leaned over to Jesus during the supper and asked, "Lord, who will betray you?" Peter asked Jesus, "What about him, Lord?" Jesus replied, "If I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? As for you, follow me." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
You may be seated. Good morning, Sojourn. Peace be with you. It's good to see you guys. Good to be with you this morning. My name's Jonah. I'm one of the pastors here at Sojourn. Thanks for coming. Our mission as a church is to reach people with the gospel of Jesus, build them up as his church, and send them to follow him in his world. And I'm thankful that you're here to be a part of it. Happy Mother's Day to you ladies. Way to go. I'm thankful to have my mom, the mother of my children here at our church. My mother-in-law, the mother of my children are here. So, thankful for you guys. And what a joy to celebrate the gift of new life with these baby dedications. It's a good day. There's a wonderful pattern in the Gospel of John that... if you look for it, you'll notice it show up over and over and over again. And sometimes we're trying to put a lot of effort as a church into not only understanding what the Bible says, but also how to read it. And those aren't always the same thing. If you go to Sunday Bible Fellowship, it's running right now and happens during both services. We don't just talk about specific verses, but we want to know how to read the Bible, because there's intentionality in the way it was written that we can miss if we're just going to read it straight like a book. And the Gospel of John is filled with those kinds of examples. So Bible pro tip time for you people who like reading the Gospel of John. This is a pattern you will see show up over and over in John's Gospel. So step one of the pattern is Jesus will state a truth. Step 2, Jesus will show what this truth does. And then step 3, he'll invite people to live in light of that truth, or to embody that truth, or to follow that truth in some way. This story, which really is the end of a story that began in John 17 with the Last Supper, this story is one such example. You got to follow it for a while to see it. A closer example of this, if you want to go play the game at home, is John 8 through 9. In John chapter 8, Jesus has this famous statement, "I am the light of the world," which try to imagine being there when someone comes to you and says, "Lo, I am the light of the world." It wouldn't sound probably as impressive as we think it sounds now. You might say something like, "What are you talking about?" So right after he says, "I am the light of the world," Jesus heals a man born blind. He states a truth, and then he shows what that truth does. What does it mean that I am the light of the world? It's kind of like if you were born blind and then someone gave you sight. And as often happens, people then argue about what Jesus just said, And so after that, there's an argument about a parable that Jesus teaches. And to kind of wrap it all up, he says, listen, guys, I am the light of the world. I give sight to the blind. What does that mean? Follow me. Trust me. Follow me. So he states a truth. He shows a truth. And then he invites people to come and live a truth. The story this morning is how the Gospel of John ends. And some folks are upset about that in the scholarly world and the commentary world, because John 20 ends in a way that is more palatable to our tradition. It makes more sense for the Gospel of John to end at the end of John 20, because at the end of John 20 it says, oh, if everything was written down that Jesus did, it couldn't fill a whole book, but it was written so that you might believe. Period, altar call, brunch. Like it's just clean and done. But then you get John chapter 21. John 20 is a very clean ending. But life is not very clean, is it? The actual lives that we live and the relationships we pursue rarely have a nice bow tie on the end where you're like, it all makes sense now, let's go to brunch. It's messy and it's complicated. And let me try to tell you why. The mission of Jesus was not only to forgive our sins. And the word only there is really important. Our tradition, churches like Sojourn, tend to see the mission of Jesus as being only about the forgiveness of sins. When we have that kind of a mindset, or we read the scriptures that way, it'd kind of be like, imagine a dad, or let's say a mom, because it's Mother's Day. Imagine a mom whose son is unjustly put in prison. And the mom shows up to bail the son out of prison. And then family members say, why did you bail him out? And the mom is like, I wanted to spend money. We would be like, what? What? You bailed them out because and the mom was just like, I'm just so passionate about paying people's debt. I'm just passionate about spending money, especially when it's unfair. If we think that the mission of Jesus is only about the forgiveness of sins, we're kind of acting like the mom in that made-up story. The mission of Jesus was not only to forgive our sins. Did he come to forgive our sins? Yes, but we must ask why. And Ephesians 1 perhaps gives us the clearest, most succinct description of the mission of Jesus. Ephesians 1:5 says, God decided in advance to adopt us into his own family by bringing us to himself through Jesus Christ. This is what he wanted to do, and it gave him great pleasure. What did he want to do? He wanted to adopt us into his family, and it gave him great pleasure to do so. So the mom in that story, the answer we would expect, why did you bail out your son? She would say, because I love my son, because I want to be with my son. So the forgiveness of sins is a means to the end of relationship. The mission of Jesus was the adoption of men and women into his family. Or to put it another way, the mission of Jesus was restored relationship between us and God and with one another. So in order to achieve that mission, our sins had to be forgiven. The bail had to be paid so mom could get her son back. If forgiveness of sin is the heart of the mission, life can get clean. What's wrong with you? You sinned. What do? Repent. And then try hard not to do it ever again, I guess. But if the mission is relationships, relationships are messy. May I have a tentative amen? Right? Relationships require nuance and words like communication and learning how to agree and learning how to disagree in ways that are encouraging and edifying and build trust. If relationship is the mission of God, we gotta prepare for some messiness. So if you go to the start of where this longer story begins, John 17, Jesus, after the Last Supper, prays for his friends in front of his friends, which means he's saying things to God that are very important for his friends to hear. And so listen to how he finishes this prayer in John 17. He says, I'm praying not only for these disciples, but also for all who will ever believe in me through their message. I pray that they will all be, say that word, one, just as you and I are one. As you are in me, Father, and I am in you. And may they be so in that the world will believe you sent me. Being one is a relationship word. He prays for unity. This is his last lesson before his death. The last stated truth. Be one. You are made to be one because the Father and I are one. Be one. Be one. We say often in our church, we're created for community. That's why if you notice in the baby dedication, we as a church reject the idea that's really recent, maybe 100 years old, of the nuclear family, meaning that all we need is just the people that live inside of your home. We are an interconnected, interdependent community, and we root that in Genesis 1, Genesis 2. We are created for community, and now in the New Testament, we see that we are restored for relationship. Relationship is the heartbeat of the mission of God. So that's the stated truth. Be one. Now, what does he do to show us? How does he show us what this looks like? Well, after the resurrection, I promise you guys this is funny. If you could go back and read the story and not be so steeped in knowing that it's the Bible, if you tried to imagine it as a movie, I promise you this is funny. So try to imagine Jesus gives this big prayer, and then Peter goes and denies Jesus, all of the violence and the brutality over the next few days. Jesus appears behind a locked room. The disciples believe. Thomas doesn't believe. They go back to lock themselves in the room. Jesus appears. Thomas believes. Powerful. What will Peter do with this revelation? John 21:3. I'm going out to fish. Peter sees Jesus resurrected. How would you feel if you were Peter? Peter, I'm telling you, before the rooster crows 3 times, you're going to deny me 3 times. You're crazy, Jesus. He does it. He watches Jesus get beaten so bad you can't recognize him. He then appears. What do you think it felt like Peter? Wondering, how is Jesus going to respond? Do you think there was a bit of an oh no in Peter when Jesus raised? Like, what's he going to do? And so how is Peter going to respond? I'm going fishing. Now, I know it's Mother's Day. I'm going to say something that I think will probably resonate with the dads a little bit more right now. Some days, I think most of what we need to know about Christianity, you can learn on a fishing boat. Now, stay with me now. Jesus' last words to them, before all of the brutality, before the inconsistency and the hypocrisy that happens in his disciples after the resurrection, his last words for them are about unity. And then Peter finds himself in the spot where unity is perhaps most necessary. If you don't fish, you can go test me on this afterwards. Find somebody, we're in southern Indiana, someone near you fishes, and ask them, who do you invite to go fishing with you? And they will not invite the person from work that's annoying. They will not invite the chatty person that just always, you ever had the dentist that just doesn't know the role that they have? You know, they just keep asking you questions with the stuff. Those people don't get invited to go fishing. Why? Because you can't make up excuses like, oh, my wife called, there's something with the kids, I got to get home. You are in a boat in the middle of a lake. Whoever you get on that boat with, you are there for minimum 8 hours. And so here in this story, in John 21, if you read the whole thing, you'll see John and Peter are in the boat. When later in the story they realize it's Jesus on the shore, John shouts, "It's Jesus." Peter puts his clothes on and goes swimming. That's a different response. In my mind, when I'm playing the movie out, I see John saying, "It is the Lamb of God, the Alpha and the Omega, in fulfillment of the Scripture." And he's doing all the Bible study. And Peter, before he says Jesus out of John's mouth, is already in the water. You got a thinker on the boat, and you got a doer on the boat. And these people act differently in the world. Some of you, when you listen to sermons, you ask, what does that mean? Some of you, when you listen to sermons, you say, well, what am I supposed to do? And here we are in the same church together. Thinkers and doers, they're on a boat together. Thinkers and doers here in a church together. Why? because Jesus saved them. And if you've been paying attention to the last few weeks, not just what's being said in church services, but what's happening in the church services, just with the baptisms, for instance, in the last, let's call it 6 weeks, we've seen people get baptized. We've seen a bunch of people get baptized. We've seen someone get baptized who met Jesus in a jail cell, and we've seen someone get baptized who met Jesus eating onion rings at Burger King. Have you listened to the stories? We've baptized people that met Jesus after a mentor died tragically. And we've baptized people who met Jesus after years of studying the Bible with their mom and dad. We've met people who met Jesus after listening to a sermon. We've baptized people who met Jesus after student ministry. All kinds of ways. Jesus shows the necessity, or what the importance, the significance of the unity he calls us to. He shows us that through the diversity of his church. We've got thinkers and we've got doers trying to figure out how to be in the same boat together. The reason that Jesus prays for unity is because Jesus is going to save all kinds of people. Jesus shows us this here in this story, certainly, but really in any of the Gospels. You could just go look and see, who is Jesus spending time with? Who comes to Jesus and calls him Lord? There's educated people and there's uneducated people. There's rich people, there's poor people. There's men, there's women. There's people who are well thought of, and there are people who are not thought much of at all. There are thinkers and there are doers. And I don't think it's a coincidence that he chooses in this group some of the people who know the most about how important unity is. Fishermen, people who are stuck on boats with people for hours and hours on end. What brought them together? Just don't even go to the thousands of people in the crowds, just the disciples. What brought them together? You realize how little they have in common? It was not affinity. It was not what their shared interest in fill in the blank that brought them together. And at least initially, it wasn't even their affection. If you go to any decently healthy church, people won't be there saying, it's because of how much we have in common, or because of how much we really like one another. You get on a boat, I don't care how careful your selection is if you go fishing, at some point the people on the boat are going to aggravate you. It wasn't affection, it wasn't affinity, it wasn't what they had in common that brought them together. It was who they had in common. And that is the secret to unity in the church. Who we have in common. If we make politics the reason that we are together as a church, two things will happen. One, it won't work, and two, politics will win. Meaning, if we think politics and our political positions are what will preserve the unity of this church, I promise you, it won't work. If we make a sport team or a hobby the reason, we're the camping church, or we're the alt-rock melancholy moody church, or we're the happy clappy seeker sensitive-y church, the center will not hold. If you make your favorite preacher the center of your church, that will not hold. If you come to this church because you like the way that I preach, in a couple of weeks you will stop coming to this church because I'm about to not preach for a long time. And if you're like, oh, what happened? Go listen to last week's sermon. It's nothing bad. It's good. My point is, the secret to restored relationship, both with God and with each other, is Jesus, from start to finish. We are saved because of what Jesus has done, and we are unified because we belong to Jesus. Now that sounds great. I promise you it will be aggravating. Experiencing that will be difficult and painful, and Jesus shows us this. So, again, by the lackluster response earlier about fishing, I'm guessing most of you don't fish. I will tell you what Jesus says next is one of the worst things you can say to fishermen. John 21, verse 5, Jesus says to them, "Friends, haven't you caught any fish?" If you're not arguing enough in your life right now and you're just itching for an argument, try to find a boat with exhausted-looking fishermen with no fish on the boat and say, "Hey, fellas, have you caught anything?" Last summer, I spent 7 days on Lake Kabetogama, which is in northern Minnesota, and it's at the Boundary Waters, right up by Canada. I went there in order to catch fish. I prefer to catch fish rather than to go fishing. There's a difference. We spent 8 hours a day on that boat, which by my math works out to about 56 hours of fishing. And we caught precisely 3 fish. Or I caught precisely 3. I think one of the guys with us had like 4 fish. And they were hammer handles, we call them, little baby ones. We're out there catching, we call slaying dragons. We're out there getting lunkers. We want the 44-inch northern pike, not these little hammer handles. And let me tell you, it was as though we were under the judgment of God. That's a level of frustration that few can understand unless you've experienced it. These guys have been up literally all night long and not caught a single fish. And Jesus comes, I see him doing one of these, like, didn't you catch anything? Why would he poke them like that? He knows they didn't catch anything, and he clearly knows that they're frustrated. They tell him the obvious, no. And Jesus doesn't let it go. He keeps on poking them. Look at what he says. If there's anything worse than asking them if you caught anything, telling them what to do is even worse. He says, throw your net on the right side of the boat, and you'll find some. Nobody fished this way. Why? On the right side of the boat is where the rudder was. That's how you steered back then. This would be the equivalent of today going to somebody on a bass boat and be like, have you tried throwing anything right by the prop on the back? Just drop your line right down by the motor. And they're all like, nobody does that. Why would you do that? So, it didn't make sense to them. I promise you they were aggravated when Jesus told them this. And so listen, in this unified family of faith, you are going to be asked uncomfortable things. Things that aggravate you and things that eventually you will find offensive. I promise you, that if you call Jesus Lord, at some point he will press into those places and he will ask you questions that bother you, that upset you. And in this family of faith, you have 2 options. Option 1 is to fuss and fight with Jesus. I don't recommend this option, but it is an option. What does fussing and fighting, what would it look like? Jesus says, throw it over to the right side. And they could have been like, we fish for a living, Jesus. Nobody does that. We know that won't work. We've been up all night. And it's not like it's a different lake on this side of the boat compared to this side of the boat. We've been wearing this, Jesus can ask you something. He can press in and you can say, don't talk to me about politics. Don't talk to me about sexuality. Don't talk to me about money. Don't talk to me about my parenting. This is the way my parents did it. It was good enough for them. I turned out okay. How dare you, Jesus? We can fuss and we can fight. God's love is wide enough, his patience is long enough that you can try that. Best of luck to you on that, fussing and fighting with the Lord of the universe. Option 2 is you can listen and obey. You can try and trust him. Again, there is a 0% chance the guys on this boat were not aggravated and frustrated during this interaction. 0% chance. But they listened, they obeyed, and they caught a lot of fish, 153 to be precise. That's how you know the story is true and really involves fishermen. Because I was laughing about this in between services. If John gets to write in there that he was the disciple that Jesus loved, Peter's in the back saying, tell him about the 153 fish. It was 153. Some people are like, what does it mean? It means they caught 153 fish. Why is it in there? Because there's some, fishermen that want to make sure that everyone knew 153 fish. Would they have thought that the recommendation was ridiculous? Absolutely. Would it have been offensive and aggravating to them? Absolutely. But they listened and they obeyed. So our relationship with God is restored through Jesus, and our unity is maintained by actively listening to Jesus. If you're the least bit like me and you're tired of fighting, and I asked the congregation this in the last service and nobody said yes, so I'm not going to do it again. But I'm just hoping some of you guys are tired of fighting. I'm hoping some of you are tired of all the arguing over the last couple of years. And if you're there, feeling kind of done with the fighting, one of the ways we can push back on that is really strive to be more curious. when we feel ourselves getting fussy and wanting to fight, to try to be curious. What's going on here? What is this about? To try to stay with the analogy a little bit, it's to say, like, why do I think I know more about fishing than Jesus? Or, like, do I really want to split the family up over fishing styles? Is this thing that I'm tempted to fight about right now, is this really worth breaking up my family over? Could there be a reason? Here's a great curiosity question. Could there be a reason that Jesus is poking me on this? Could Jesus be trying to do something in me through the fact that this is bothering me so much? Part of the reason that all of this is recorded for us in stories and not just bullet point statements, the Bible could be way shorter. If all God wanted you to do was believe the right things and do the right things, we could get, like, I don't know, a top 10 list, do this and don't do this, and it could be like only worship God. It could be like take a day off. It could be like don't steal, don't lie, don't kill people. Let the reader understand. He's tried that, and we didn't do it. He gives us stories so that we can take these with us and chew on it and reflect on it, carry it with us and think, who am I in this? And what am I to do in response to this? So let me try to put some big pieces together to help you soak on this in the days to come. Jesus prays for his disciples to be unified, John 17. Shortly after, one of his friends betrays him. Peter then denies him. After his resurrection, they hide. He appears to them, forgives their sins, breathes the Holy Spirit on them. Thomas doesn't believe. Even still, the disciples keep hiding. Jesus appears to Thomas. Thomas believes. All seems well. Here we go. Peter goes fishing. Jesus is not frustrated or disappointed. In my mind, I imagine Jesus saying, I can do something with this. He's on a boat. To try and finally show them what his prayer for unity means, what the forgiveness of sins means, and what the truth he is inviting them to live is, he allows them to have a fish-less night of fishing. He blesses them with abundance as they trust him. And now it's time for the lesson and the invitation. Maybe take just a second and think about what you think is your great betrayal of Jesus. The big failure that you've had in life, or the thing that you feel like this is the reason that God keeps doing this to me. And if you imagine Jesus showing up to you to talk about it, what would you imagine the first words out of Jesus' mouth would be? Well, here now, the first one-on-one words Jesus gives to the disciple who betrayed him. Bring some of those fish you caught. Let's have some breakfast. And maybe something to be curious about is if what you think Jesus would say to you is really different than like, hey, would you like to have some breakfast with me? Instead of beating yourself up over that, consider, what are you showing me about this? How is my view of you so different than what you've shown us in your word? It says that he had a charcoal fire going, which means as he sees these fishermen out there, he's like, I know what I'm going to do. He said they're making a fire. He's already preparing. He's putting some fish on the grill. Tired. Hey, you're wet. Peter, I knew you were going to be swimming. I've got a fire going for you. You guys haven't eaten all night. You must be hungry. I've prepared breakfast for you. And after they eat, Jesus gives Peter his final lesson. A third time he asked him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt that Jesus asked the question a third time. He said, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said, then feed my sheep. How different of a question is, do you love me, versus how could you? What does that reveal about the heart of Jesus? 3 times Jesus asks Peter a question, and it's no coincidence. It's no coincidence Peter feels the hurt after the third one. Can you think of the third, a time where Peter felt really hurt after being asked a question the third time? Jesus so patiently and gently is restoring Peter from his previous triple denial. And please notice that there's an invitation and action from Jesus here. He's showing him what does forgiveness means. It means instead of getting an angry God condemning you, you get a God who cooks you breakfast. Instead of getting a God eager to rain hellfire and brimstone down on you, even after your repeated failures, he says, I've made a fire for you, and I have breakfast ready for you, because I'm sure you must be hungry. He's showing Peter what forgiveness means. And then he's inviting Peter into restored relationship. If you want to live forgiven and be someone new, this is what you do. Feed my sheep. See, a restored relationship is never just a word or a confession. It's not about just saying, fine, I'm sorry. It begins there. But reconciliation is a life that flows from there. It's a way of being. And isn't that what we all want? Don't we all long for relationships that are secure enough, secure and safe and wrapped in love enough that we can be empowered to change? I can't be the only one that hopes I'm different in 5 years. Less if possible. Don't we want someone that can press into those painful places in us, but in a way that we know we're loved and that actually enables us to become better, stronger, more beautiful? We don't want words, we want transformation. We want restored relationship. And this is what Jesus has been building towards since his ministry began. If you love me, Peter, you'll be one, just like you were on that boat. And what will that mean? It will mean taking care of the people that I love you. What will that mean? Maybe instead of yelling at them, you make them breakfast. Maybe you're like John, wondering what to think about this. And maybe you're like Peter, wondering, what am I supposed to do about this? Wherever you are, I really encourage you to carry the story with you. Think about, who am I in the story? Who do I identify with? And if you identify with Jesus, try harder. Try harder. Or try different, however you want. Assuming you're not Jesus, who do you identify with in the story? And then just consider, what would it look like for me to hear Jesus say, feed my sheep? Some of you are going to put a ton of pressure on yourselves to get this right. If you listened, Peter didn't get it right immediately after this conversation. Jesus says, feed my sheep, Peter, because when you're old, people will drag you around and tell you what to do. That's how you're going to die. And what does Peter immediately say? He looks over at John, the one Jesus loved, and he said, well, what about that guy? If I'm going to die this way, what about... Peter, even then, he's not like, I trust and obey, Lord. Thank you for this gracious breakfast of forgiveness. I understand it fully. He's like, well, if I'm going to die this way, what about that idiot? And what does Jesus say? He's like, hey, man, what's that to you? It's not your job to figure out what they're supposed to do. And it's not your job to figure out my will for their life. You feed my sheep. This is what you are to do, Peter, so stay there. The mission of God is restoring our relationship with him and each other. We do this by keeping Jesus as the center of who we are. And we do this by focusing ourselves on feeding the ones Jesus loved. And who did Jesus love? Maybe a better question is to ask, who didn't Jesus love? So every week we root ourselves in this stunning picture of what Jesus has done for us, that we might be compelled to experience this gospel of grace anew and go and do likewise. And so we remember the night that Jesus was betrayed. He took a loaf of bread, he blessed it, thanked God for it, broke it, and he said to his disciples, this is my body. It's given for you. Eat this in remembrance of me. In the same way, when the meal was over, he took a cup of wine. He said, this is the cup of the new covenant. Covenant's a fancy Bible word for relationship. He's saying, this is what seals your relationship with God. He doesn't say what makes it possible or potential. This is the cup that seals your relationship with God. And what seals it? My blood shed for you. If we hang our fellowship with God and each other on anything but the blood of Jesus, it will collapse under its own weight. The center will not hold. And so we come every week to remember what enables us to enter into this family, the body of Christ given for us. And what keeps us safe in this family forever is the blood of Christ shed for us.